Where are you all coming from? Sacramento. Fantastic. You drove down?
I'm on vacation.
Great. Thanks for spending some of your vacation with us. My name is Vaisesika. Pleasure to meet you. What's your name? Gabriel. Glad to see you. San Jose? Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. Good to see everybody. Well, what I recommend as far as seating goes is if we can get a couple extra mats and put them in the front. Just from my experience with geometry and trigonometry, which is limited. Well, this is a center for spiritual cultivation, and it's founded by our teacher, otherwise known as an acharya, which is a title meaning someone who passes down a system of knowledge in a practical way. Acharya means activity. So spiritual philosophy that doesn't have an on-ramp or doesn't have access for people in general or for anyone who wishes to join it. We need more asanas over here too, because some devotees are sitting on the bare floor. And anyone's welcome to move up, since I'm a vegetarian. And no need to be afraid. If you have a system of knowledge, but it remains abstract, then what use is it? There has to be a direct access. So an acharya is somebody who, by example and by precept, codification, gives a simple process that everyone has an opportunity to experience directly who they are at their core, beyond the various roles we play in this temporary life, and who feel more and more adjusted in their lives by practicing it. These are some of the symptoms of a spiritual practice. And according to the ancient sages of India, the ideas should be universal, universally applicable. And when you have universality and practicality, and you put those together, and probably there's some overlap with those ideas, those concepts, then you have what Kṛṣṇa describes in the Bhagavad-gītā as pratyaksha avagamam dharmyam. He calls it the perfect execution of dharma, which dharma means that which holds us together. And pratyaksha means that you can directly experience it for yourself by a practice. So a mainstay of the practice of bhakti is to connect to our supreme source, our original source. And this is a preface to the teachings of the ancient sages who bring us these ideas and who also expound upon what's called shastra, or ancient literatures that are said to be co-eternal with our divine source. They're always there, and they're manifest in human society for the benefit of everyone. And one of the beginning points is that we all come from a common source. In Sanskrit, it's janmadhyasya yataha, which means that we all emanate from one original divine source. So we're all related. If you consider just on a bodily level, we're all made of the same materials: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, ego. Those are gross and subtle elements Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad-gītā, and that's what we're made of, basically. We, as far as our, as I like to say, biomechanical robot that we're living in right now, the human body. And beyond that, we all are related spiritually. And one of the very interesting concepts, if you like interesting concepts, mind-boggling concepts, are that we're one and different simultaneously. This is one of the teachings of the founder of this particular branch of Vedic study, whose name is Śrī Caitanya. And he taught that we are at once the same and different simultaneously. And how would he explain that in a simple way? Well, he did explain it by giving the example of the sun. Sun, you could say, is one entity, but it has different parts. For instance, right now, there's sun rays coming in the room, and many of you are illuminated by those right now. And you could say, well, you're touched by the sun, but if you were touched by the sun proper, then you might evaporate very quickly. At least you need some electrolytes pretty quickly. So we are the same, but we're also different at the same time, in that there's the whole and then there are the parts of the whole. And spiritually, we're all conscious entities. Or I should say, we're all conscious entities. And consciousness sometimes defined as spirit. It's beyond mind, it's beyond intelligence, it's who we actually are, called the Atma, or the self. Once I was invited to give some classes on Krishna consciousness to youngsters. I was passing through Hawaii and they asked me to give a few classes. And there were some young students, probably in the 4th grade, maybe 3rd grade. They asked, teach Krishna consciousness to these kids. And I made them so bored by my presentation that I think they hated me. At least they were acting in passive-aggressive ways, like, get rid of this guy. So one of my colleagues who was more experienced at talking to that age level, he said, no, here, I'll show you how to do it in the next class. And he started a game called Simon Says. And in the game Simon Says, the person who's facilitating the game is called Simon. And if Simon says to do something, then you do it. And if Simon doesn't say Simon Says and then you do it, and he just says, and you do it anyway, then you're out of the game. I don't know if that was helpful or not, but for instance, if I said, Simon says, touch your head, then you touch your head. And I said, now touch your arm. But Simon didn't say, so you're out. So anyway, and it's amazing how much our minds follow a command anyways. Like, just touch your nose. And like, I didn't say Simon said, I forgot. And by the end, there was one kid standing out of 30 of them. He's like, yay. And then he said, Simon says, point to yourself. And now he had everyone's attention because everyone had been eliminated except this kid. And then he gave him the last Simon Says command, and he said, now point to yourself. And he was going like this, well, what do you mean? What is myself? And that's when he opened the talk about the Atma, or what is the actual self within the body. Is it my hand? The hand's made out of water, basically, and it's got a few other ingredients thrown in, but it's not me. I say my hand, I don't say I hand. And what it comes down to in the Bhagavad-gītā is the definition of what the self is. And that self is categorically different from the body and from the rest of the world. And simultaneously, it's part of the supreme Atma. So there's two Atmas. One is called Paramatma, and the supreme self. And what is the characteristic of supreme self? Well, there are many qualities, but one of them is, Kṛṣṇa describes in the Bhagavad-gītā, the supreme self is called Kavi. Kavi means the one who knows everything. And as parts of the whole, we don't know that much. In fact, I'm in dialogue with a professor at Brown University. His name's Professor Sloman. And he wrote a book called The Knowledge Illusion. And he's a psychologist, and he talks a lot about how we think we know a lot more than we actually do. Because if if you ask somebody to describe how something works, like, how does that thing work? The harmonium, you may think, well, I know how that works, but if you actually had to describe it, tell somebody how to build one, it would be very difficult. He gives the example of a commode. Do you know how a commode works? Everyone uses one, but then, do you know how it works? And it's actually more complicated than one might think. It requires engineering. And we just assume we know a lot of things, but we don't. But the Supreme, the definition of the Paramatma, is the one who does know everything. In fact, omniscience is one of the qualities for the three O God or Supreme: omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. It's the 3O God. And omniscience means that it knows everything in all times, in all places, in all circumstances. So we don't know everything in all times, in all places, in all circumstances, but the Supreme Consciousness does. But we do know something about our own field of activities. We're in a field right now, this body, and so we can be slightly aware of what that is. And also, we're the same quality as the Supreme, so we do have a sense of cognizance. We're cognizant. And we can be conscious and direct our consciousness in various ways. And yoga means to redirect your consciousness and connect it to the Supreme Conscious Source. This is what is the connection indicated by the word yoga, which means to connect. And when we have that connection, then we feel whole, because we're parts of the whole. And now that's all very, very philosophical, or somewhat philosophical. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, well, how to make it practical? How can you experience that directly for yourself? There have been many attempts to people have had since the beginning of time to extricate themselves from the entanglement in bodily consciousness. Bodily consciousness means I'm conscious of all the pains, and every once in a while a slight pleasure, but it's mostly 99.9% painful living in a material body. People have taken certain kinds of intoxicants to try to have an out-of-body experience. People drink things that help them to feel aloof from their body. Of course, it doesn't work out that well, because then one becomes more entangled in the bodily conception and addicted to a particular substance. But nonetheless, that's been a human endeavor since the beginning of time. And there's another person whose book I'm perusing right now, who talks about how this has been extant in human society since a time immemorial. People experimenting with various chemicals to try to have that sense of out of body experience. And then you have this other approach that comes from the Bhagavad-gītā, which is to engage in activities that are naturally transcendental, which which resonate with our nature as spiritual beings. And through those inherently spiritual activities, then we'll be able to experience ourselves directly. And in that sense, the teaching of Śrī Caitanya could be considered what we call sonic theology. And that is that, how would one do that, have that experience? It's through sound vibration. Sound is very powerful. In fact, physicists describe the world in terms of waves. Sound comes in waves. And there are ways in which we investigate the world that which is beyond our normal senses through sound. For instance, there's ultrasound, where you look inside the body and you can ascertain what's in there. For instance, a woman's pregnant. You can look in and see the features of the fetus and say, oh, it's a boy or it's a girl. And you can say, oh yeah, they're in there and they're kicking. And through sonar, normally the ocean is has so much particulate matter in it, it's opaque, so you can't really see it very clearly. Some places you can wear a mask and you can look down because the water's clearer, but generally it's hard to make out what's in the depths of the ocean for lack of light also. But through sonar, you get a really clear picture, or a much clearer picture anyway. It's sound vibration that bounces off and comes back to you. Doctors often use, in fact, what is the quintessential emblem of a doctor? How you know if somebody's an authority? They wear a stethoscope around their neck. Then you go, oh yeah, tell me anything and I'll believe it. And so I just say that, not to disrespect doctors anyway, but I just remember in the 60s, cigarette companies used to put people on TV wearing a stethoscope, and they'd say, you should smoke cigarettes. Anyway, they listen to the harmonics of the heart. There are harmonics that a trained ear can ascertain the condition of the heart, or if there's any malady there. And so in a similar way, Śrī Caitanya taught that we can resonate with our higher self, which is the Atma, very mysterious because it's beyond matter. It's metaphysical. It's not part of this world. And that's who we are. We're not part of this world, actually, but somehow we're ensconced in matter in a kind of trance-like situation where it's called a binibheshita. We've become attracted to matter because it glitters, and we think there's something in it for us, and we get more and more involved in it. And it's also described in the Srimad Bhagavatam as a kind of a forest where somebody thinks that they will find a treasure in the forest, and they wander into it, and then they get lost. And then there's a series of mishaps where they fall into ditches and walk through sticker bushes, get harassed by animals, not the least of which are crickets that are making such a racket they can't even hear. And so it's a conundrum. But one can rise beyond that involvement in the material world through transcendental sound. That's what I mean by sonic theology. That there's a way in which the Supreme connects to us and offers us a bridge to a higher stratum beyond the material world through the sound vibration. And that's the essence of Lord Chaitanya's teachings. And that's the essence of our movement. That's why we're called Hare Krishna. In fact, when George Harrison was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, his old friend, who's also a musician, called Tom Petty, he talked about the life of George Harrison, and then he said, and now we're going to, all of us here in this room, this was posthumously because George had already passed, he said, we're going to bring him into the Hall of Fame. Are you ready? And they said yes, and he said, okay, everyone say Hare Krishna. And the whole crowd said Hare Krishna. And so how do you push somebody into the Hall of Fame? Well, you say Hare Krishna, I guess. And how do you push someone into the spiritual world? You just say Hare Krishna. And that's how simple the philosophy is. And animals can do it. I mean, they can't necessarily chant, but they can hear it. And bugs can hear it also. And if you feel any compassion for worms like I do, because sometimes I see them crawling out of a nice marshy area and heading across a hot sidewalk into no man's land where they're going to get crushed or something like that. It's like, would you get it together, guys? Hare Krishna. And that's kind of how we are in general in the material world, crawling across a hot surface into, where are you going? I don't know. Like, well, maybe you want to think about it. And that's really the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Maybe you want to stop for a minute and think about where you're going. Are you heading into a desert somewhere and you're going to dry up like a little worm in a hot field? And so Bhagavad-gītā gives that perspective, and then Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu comes to simplify the Bhagavad-gītā. He says, okay, you don't have a lot of time for philosophy in this age. After all, you got to go to kindergarten, and that's a lot of responsibility. You got to finger paint and all that stuff, and then learn how to cooperate with others. And it doesn't stop either. You know, once you finish college, you got to get an internship, right? And for the internships, like, okay, you're hired, and by the way, you got to work hard. So, I mean, it doesn't stop in the material world. So Lord Chaitanya said, okay, we need a simple way that people can connect directly to that fourth dimension beyond all the considerations and the anxieties we have here in this world. We need a transport system that takes us to the next level. And so he said, it's sound vibration. It's very simple. One thing, that's it. Only one thing. And if you just invest your intelligence in it and understand how it's possible on a physical level, you can understand how it will work on a metaphysical level. And then you can concentrate long enough to embrace the process. But even if you can't, that's okay. Because the chanting is very engaging. As an example, we did an experiment the other night. We went down to Lytton Plaza. Of course, we've been doing this experiment a lot. Based on the law of large numbers, we like to do a lot of experiments to see the ultimate result, the average mean. But we went down to Lytton Plaza and we set up an arena there just to transmit spiritual sound to the environment to see what would happen. And, you know, the dogs walked by. There were dogs. Of course, the dogs were walking their people down the street. And the dogs walked by and they were like, yeah, this is a pretty groovy scene. That's what they were saying mentally. And then the people walk by and they have various reactions as per Krishna's prediction in the Bhagavad-gītā, that some people would be so taken aback by a spiritual sound that it might even be repulsive to them. Because it's so counter to the sounds we hear, like when you walk in a supermarket and you hear some background noise, commercially marketed as muzak, and the do-do-do-do, I'm going to buy some cereal now. And, you know, you have all these sounds that, you know, familiar to the conditioned ear, conditioned to living within matter and trying to negotiate how to live within in this lower energy. And then when you hear something comes from this categorically different stratum, it can be alarming. And other people react to it by becoming very curious. You can see the curiosity. They'll stop and say, I don't know what it is, but it's something. And a few years ago, more than a few, we did a documentary film about that chanting down there. And some of the producers interviewed people that live or work along the University Avenue. And I just remember one of the interviews, the woman was saying, they come here all the time, and it's fantastic. I really don't know what it is, but it's fantastic. And that's the experience initially, that there's something special there, that it's beyond the ordinary. And that's just the beginning. It's a gateway that opens up into a lifestyle of joy and opening of the heart and reconnecting with our original home. Home is where the heart is. And we should have to be home knowing to be home going. And you can hear home, just like the fish. The salmon that live up in Muir Woods, they spawn there and then they swim down to the Pacific Ocean. They go thousands of miles. Some of the scientists track them sometimes. They go thousands of miles, several years, then they come back to the same stream they were born in. They swim upstream. They find the very place where they were born, and that's where they reproduce, and then they die there. And I heard that from one of the rangers there in the Muir Woods Park. And then I was thinking how that's our system also. Just by hearing, oh, by the way, how do the fish get back there? They smell it. And so how do we get back to the original spiritual realm that we're actually looking for, even if we don't know it, is through the sound vibration. So the only process recommended in this present age is to chant the spiritual mantra and listen to it. That's all. Doesn't it make it simpler? You wanted something more complex? Okay. So let's try it. We have a few percussion instruments, a melodious squeeze box here known as the harmonium. We have flown in a musician, professional musician, who's also a devotee, play on the bass guitar. And we have our mridanga, which is usually the bass, but we reinforce the bass here by having two basses to give a little backbone to it. The main thing is the sound of the mantra itself. So you can just listen and get absorbed in the sound of the mantra, and don't worry if you get carried away by it. Don't worry if you start smiling. It's okay. You're amongst friends. If you get inspired, you want to stand up and start dancing, that's okay too. Really, it's okay. And we'll start with a couple of introductory mantras. One of them is a prayer of respect to our teacher, who's the founder of the organization, who brought the process painstakingly and set up centers like this one all around the world, on every continent, except for the North Pole. And we just got that covered recently. And then we have a mantra to Śrī Caitanya and his associates that comes after this. Then we go into the chanting of Hare Krishna. So the first ones we'll say together, if you like, or you can just listen if you're not familiar with all this complicated Sanskrit stuff. But the mantra itself is really simple. It's 3 words: Hare, Krishna, and Rama. These are all sacred names of the Supreme. So Hare means the energy of the Supreme, because Supreme means not only the person who's the origin of everything, but all of his energies. And his primary energy is called Hladini Shakti. Shakti means energy, and Hladini means bliss. And she is personified in the form of Srimati Radharani. So you see here on our altar, on the right side is Srimati Radharani, who's white, and then Krishna, who's black. So you have Hare means Srimati Radharani, and Krishna means Krishna, the all-attractive. Have you ever heard the word charisma? Say it 4 times. It sounds like you're chanting Hare Krishna. So the word charisma, in the definition of it, is somebody who has charisma is undeniably attractive. Either it's their fame or their beauty. If somebody's so beautiful or so famous, you just can't stop looking at them. And you want to follow them around. That happens, right? And the person, the origin of all of these opulences, so to speak, is Krishna. Very similar concepts. And then you have Rama. Everyone say Rama. There's a verse from the ancient Sanskrit texts that say that Rama means the kind of pleasure you experience that gives you the wherewithal to just flat leave everything else. Not that you should, because you may have duties to do in the world. But you know what flat leaving means? It's a New York term. If someone's like in a relationship and then you just walk away from it, and they say, "What happened to your friend?" And it's like, "He flat left me." It means just flat walked away. And so this world, we have kind of a strange relationship with, because we keep getting hammered on the head, but we keep going back for more. It's hard to give up because we don't have an option of where else to go. But when you have Rama, it's a higher platform of pleasure. That's what it means. The actual fulfillment of all our desires means Rama, the highest spiritual pleasure. Once we taste that, the whole world looks like an insignificant little puddle somewhere. And we just say, that thing? No thanks. And that's the power of Rama. It means spiritual strength. Spiritual strength to be able to give up those inane types of activities that we may fall into and think, like, that's a really dumb thing you're doing. Your intelligence is speaking to you and saying, that's really stupid. And you go, yeah, but I can't help it. That's a very inconvenient situation to be in. But Rama, spiritual power, gives you the wherewithal to express your own integrity and say, yeah, it's not good for me, and plus, I'm not interested in it anymore. I'm not going to touch it again. That's what comes from Rama, spiritual strength, the kind of pleasure where you'd rather be somewhere better, and you always have somewhere better to go. So that's Hare Krishna Rama, and it makes up the mantra. And so let's experiment right in this room, which was built acoustically and size-wise to fit a certain number of people. That's 216 exactly, so that we could chant the mantra, which is also a balanced number of syllables, 16 and 32. And we could have this experience together of entering into or rising above the modalities of this world into the higher realm of spiritual consciousness. Are you ready? Yes. You guys sound fantastic. It's amazing to just be sitting up here and hear the power of everybody singing at the same time. I mean, just choruses in general bring joy to the heart. That's why people sing so much. But when you combine it with the Transcendental Mantra, then simultaneously it's opening the heart just on a visceral level, because melody, rhythm, and so forth is universally appealing. And then when there's a transcendental subject matter, or the song itself is a vibration that is otherworldly, then the effect is indelible and very deep. And this is what Śrī Caitanya said was the Yuga Dharma, or a universally practiced spiritual, well, it's a universal practice that everyone can take part in. People love music, they love melody, they like to dance, they like to be together socially. And so this is called Sankirtan. Kirtan is the singing out loud. It comes from the root word kirti in Sanskrit, which means to glorify someone, to advertise, to make somebody famous. Kirti means fame. It's like you're advertising the fame of somebody. And Sankirtan means to do it together. So there's the power of the group intention. And Chaitanya started the process of chanting in somebody's house. And it was exclusive. Only certain people could come in who understood the process. He didn't let just anybody in at that time. For a year, they practiced. Not all at once, just at night. And, of course, the neighbors didn't like it. But we've had that since the very beginning of the Hare Krishna movement. So we keep odd hours, get up early in the morning and chant. And some people tried to get in, they weren't admitted, didn't have the access to all areas pass. And after a year, Śrī Caitanya asked all of his chanters to go out into the local town and chant outside together. So he taught that it would have a beneficial effect on all living beings, just by everyone chanting together. And then, of course, somebody called the police, and they came, and they said, cut it out. And the chanters went back to Śrī Caitanya and said, the police came, they roughed us up, they broke one of these and said, if you come back, we'll break them all. And Chaitanya started a protest rally, even before we had him here in San Francisco. Actually, San Francisco State University was the source of, during the 60s, that's where the anti-war protests started from, things like that. But even before that, and even before Gandhi started these civil disobedience, Chaitanya started it hundreds of years ago. But he added a transcendental aspect to it, and that was that everyone would get together and they would chant. And first hundreds, then thousands, then millions of people came. And they went to the house of the governor and stood outside and chanted. And he freaked out. And then Chaitanya went in and talked to him. And after that, after they had a conversation, he said, okay, you guys can chant. I'll give you a little thing here. From every generation in my family, you can keep chanting here, no problem. And Chaitanya spread the chanting around the world, and then there's a line of participants in this process called Sankirtan who have written about its efficacy according to the ancient wisdom texts like Bhagavad-gītā, and they've practiced it individually in the form of chanting on a rosary and chanting the same mantra privately, and they've written volumes about their mystical experiences in chanting the mantra. And then there's been a missionary aspect to this, that let's make the world a better place. And how would you do it? You would start with upgrading the sound vibration in the world, because every realm is defined by the quality of sound it's in, that pervades that particular area. And so the mission of Śrī Caitanya, he wrote a mission statement for everybody. He said, do this in every town and village all over the world. Make sure it goes everywhere. So we're part of that. And there are some modern means to expand the vibration also. It goes like this, that the written word is just speech abstracted. And you can reconstitute it anywhere. So, as an example, if we wanted, who's the most famous person in San Francisco, would you say? There's no more famous people here? Robin Williams is gone. Who? Mark Zuckerberg lives in San Francisco? Oh, no. Oh. All right, we'll take Mark Zuckerberg. Where does he live? Los Angeles? He lives in Palo Alto? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, we can go to his house. We went to Steve Jobs' house once and chanted. Anyway, we go to Mark Zuckerberg's. He may or may not let us in. Steve was a little more cool. I know, Mark, if you're watching, you're cool too. But, you know, he might not let us in, but let's say if we dropped a book off at his house that had the mantra in it, then effectively, and this is what the teachers of this process have opined over many years, over centuries, is that if in the written word, which is speech abstracted, if you write the mantra down and then you give it to somebody, same effect will be there, because they'll take it home, look at the mantra, and then they'll say it, and then you've expanded it. So they had this idea that through the written word, they called it written kirtan, they would make it available. So if a book goes in Mark Zuckerberg's house, then he would have it there. He would sit down one night, start reading it, and then what? And then he could change his consciousness in many ways. And so there's also an aspect of this movement that the sound vibration that has been passed down over millennia is in written form now, and anyone can take advantage of that and have a direct connection with the spiritual realm. And books like Bhagavad-gītā, they don't just have one mantra, but there are many mantras which fortify our intelligence, which give us insight and so forth. So there's this combination, there's variety within the practice of bhakti, and there's also food. And this is universal as well. Everyone likes to have nice food, except spoil sports, and then they're really cranky people who don't like food. So the food is one of the transcendental practices, the prasadam, food that's offered first to God. And then when you partake of it, it has a different flavor altogether, and it has a different effect on the consciousness. So at least there's three things. There's chanting, and then there's reading of these books, and then there's food. And dancing, of course. And we'll do that in a few minutes. Whoever wants to can get up, and we'll have another kirtan, and you can dance. And this is the mission of our small center here, is to, we have a plan over the next 5 years to populate the Bay Area with centers like this, where everyone in their local neighborhood can come and join in and have chanting sessions. Already we have a center in Santa Cruz. Anybody from Santa Cruz here? It's here for Santa Cruz. And we have a center in San Francisco. Anyone from San Francisco? No shout outs for San Francisco? Okay, yay, San Francisco. I'll fill in. And we have a center in Berkeley. A lot of devotees are in Berkeley tonight. Anybody from Berkeley? Where are you all from anyway? We're talking about starting something in Lafayette, Walnut Creek. And we have a place in Santa Rosa. Anybody from Santa Rosa? Did I hear Santa Rosa up there? And so the idea is to, all over the Bay Area, have a place where everybody can come together. And then at intervals, we'll all get together in one place, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of us, and we'll have kirtan together. What do you think? Everybody said, Hari Bol, you're invited, you can come. Even the ones who didn't say that, they can come. So now we have this community, and nobody lives here except for one person. And he helps take care of things here. And then devotees come here early in the morning and stay till late at night and conduct the spiritual work that goes on here and many of the practical things. And most people live outside. And then they come here at intervals and also join for programs on Zoom on a regular basis. Practically every night of the week we have something on Zoom where people, after they finish work at night, they can tune in and have a spiritual program. And we also conduct retreats for those who want to take a few days and go on a retreat. And then we also have what we call yatras, where at intervals we go together to places in India where Kṛṣṇa was born, for instance, in Vrindavan, and where Lord Chaitanya resided in a place called Mayapur. And that's a lot of fun and very spiritually enlivening. So there's a lot of variety for everybody here. And also there's a lot of fun in executing the missionary part of our community, which is to go out into public and chant Hare Krishna. And also, yesterday we had several hundred devotees volunteered to go out into various neighborhoods all over the Bay Area. Some went door to door, some went to farmers markets, and just met people and presented books like the Bhagavad-gītā and the Śrīmad Bhagavatam. It was very well received. In fact, the places where I went, there was a lineup of people waiting to see who could, they wanted to inquire, how do we get one of those? And when we went door to door, at least the people were at home, some people were out yesterday, but when we went to the doors and greeted people, it was as if we had broken a spell of boredom inside the house. And it was everything we could do to break away from them because they wanted us to stay longer and hear more about the Bhagavad-gītā. That was the experience around the Bay Area. So it's a right place where people are experience a little bit of monotony from the way that their lives are going in the world. So in order to break that monotony, we invite everyone to chant, dance, feast, and read the Bhagavad-gītā. And now let's see if anybody has any questions. We'll take two more. We'll take a few questions, if you like, or reflection. And then I have a couple other things planned that you're going to like.
Hare Krishna. You initially described the power of sound vibrations, specifically of this Hare Krishna Mahamantra. In some readings I've done, there's also been a discussion of a process called karma. My understanding of karma is that there can be good karma, there can be bad karma, but they're two independent, individual things, and that the sound vibration is ultimately superior to that karma. Is that understanding accurate? Specifically, the fact that the karma has that the positive and the negative can be two separate entities, I guess, within karma.
Well, oftentimes, what's considered good karma, bad karma are two sides of the same coin. Whether it's good karma or bad karma, you're still engaged in the material world. But then there's transcending the material world, and in the Bhagavad-gītā, Kṛṣṇa talks about how if you engage in spiritual activities, step by step you can rise above karma altogether and come to what's called akarma, where you're working but the reaction isn't there. And that's a good thing, because the reactive part of karma obligates us. It's a kind of debt that we have to stay and pay over and over again here in this world, because to live in this material world means to live at the cost of others' lives. Just by breathing, we kill other living entities. By eating, we kill others, even if we're vegetarians or vegans. And there's a way in which just the life here in this world obligates us to try to make up for those debts. Karma is a kind of debt. And if we do good things, then we're obligated in the next life to enjoy on a superior level. But it's not really enjoyment, it's just obligation to have a lot of stuff. Rich people are unhappy too. I mean, I hate to break it to anybody, but not that I would know. So the idea in the Bhagavad-gītā is to rise above material activity, whether it's good or bad. And Kṛṣṇa gives us an example in the Bhagavad-gītā of how to live like a lotus. A lotus lives in the water, but it's never touched by the water. The water splashes on it, but it just rolls right off. And so he says, when your intention in this world is to serve God and not to serve yourself, then the work that you do doesn't obligate you, nor do you create a debt that obligates you to come back life after life and live in this world. So Chaitanya explained that if you change your intention in life to serving Krishna from trying to serve yourself, then you're like the lotus flower and you don't get touched by the material world. Karma, good karma or bad karma. Thank you for such a nice question. We do give $100, or rupees if you prefer, for a bad question. And he's vouched for paying for it in this note here. Oh, 5 Prabhu's help needed for Janmashtami pre-cleanup. Right now? No, not right now. Oh, okay, thank you. All right. Well, it's just a notice that there is a lot of opportunity for doing that kind of karmic work here. There's a community, and everyone here is a volunteer. Nobody's paid employee. So everyone who does some job here is doing it out of this intention that I want to serve Krishna. And it's all absolute. If you sweep the floor or you take care of the deities, it's all service to Krishna, and it's all akarmic, and it's all blissful. So what he wrote in this note is that there's at least 5 opportunities for anybody who wants to help doing some blissful work, I think in the kitchen after this. Am I correct? Okay. Yes, he volunteers. Or you want to ask a question?
Maharaj, my question is related to a verse in Ishopanishad. I think it may be a Ishopanishad or it may be some other Upanishad. Vidyam cha, avidyayam cha, something like that it says. You have to cultivate knee signs and also signs, something like together. My question is...
I'll say the verse that vidyam cha yas tad vedo bayam saha avidyayam ratum tirtva vidyayam ratum ashnute. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality.
So my dilemma is that...
dilemma, you have a dilemma, go ahead.
When you associate with something, you acquire those qualities. Let's say if you associate with a drunkard, you become a drunkard.
Yes.
Let's say you associate with a cricket player, you become a cricketer.
Yes.
So when you associate with matter, you become a materialist.
Yeah.
So in this verse, isn't it contradictory that it's saying associate with spirituality and also associate with matter? And somebody who is very weak, he may be sucked into this matter. So that's a dangerous proposition, I feel sometimes.
Yeah. So don't remain weak. That's one thing. That's why it's important to practice chanting Hare Krishna. Remember how I mentioned Rama gives you spiritual strength? So if you don't chant Hare Krishna, you might get weak. If you don't eat, you might get weak too. So we have to, spiritually, we have to fortify ourselves. And it's not necessarily true if you associate with matter, then you become entrapped by it. Consider somebody goes into a prison. I've been to prison, but as a guest. And I went to a prison in Arizona to visit a person who was reading the Śrī Caitanya and other books, and was very interested in finding out more about it. So I made a journey out there, and I met him in a prison. It's not even a jail. And I could walk out because I wasn't associated with the prison in the same way that the prisoner was. Prisoner doesn't get to walk out. In fact, he's in for life. No possibility of parole. So his situation and mine was different. And so if we're in the material world, we can associate with the world. We don't have to withdraw from it. But if, as I described before, we don't have criminal intent, which is to squat here. You know what squatters are? They can occupy your house, and I don't know how to get away with it, but it's really hard to get rid of them. There's a lot of legal wranglings you have to go through. In fact, there's companies, I've seen signs around here that said, if you want squatters out, call us. But even they have a hard time. So we're all basically squatting here in the material world. And because it's God's property, we just sit on it and say, yeah, this is my place. But if we don't have that intention, and we're there for a different reason in the prison, we don't get entrapped by it. So the idea of the verse, as Prabhupada explains in the purport, is that we're already involved with matter. So you shouldn't get more involved. You've already tried it. It's all been done and more. And so don't try to increase your material involvement in the material world. Whatever you have is enough. Just go with that. Do your duty. Do what you have to do to survive in the world, and do it well. And according to what your means are, earn a living. As the Bhagavatam says, kamasya nendriya pritir labho jivita yavata. Live to be healthy so you can do spiritual practice. So that part of the material world you have to coexist with, because you can't just walk away from it and think that you're not going to be dragged back in. You have to cultivate spiritual practice side by side with what you're doing now. And Bhakti Yoga lends to that very well. You don't have to sleep on the floor. You don't have to walk away and live in a forest. Live in the world, but don't be entrapped by it, and stay transcendental by practicing using everything as paraphernalia to be used in service. And then you're never touched by the world, just like the lotus flower. Okay, so thank you for the 2 questions, and thank you, very important questions. And we have are we okay, Sri Gopal? Everyone fine? Okay, so now, if you like, we're going to take 5 minutes to see if you can meet somebody that you haven't met before, and just introduce yourself. So stand up for 5 minutes, take a short break, and we're going to finish with some Sankirtan. They're already started. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Talk to somebody you don't know, not somebody you came with, somebody you haven't met before. Meet somebody. Introduce yourself. Stand up.